I don't really do movie news discussions as often as I'd like to or should, but I'm trying to start that now with a new segment I like to call News That I Care About. It's a hopefully weekly segment where I just talk about movie news stories that are interesting to me and I think would be fun to talk about. The first of which is going to be a post-mortem on the box office this weekend, focusing on Tron Ares and the fallout after that film. Tron Ares came out last weekend, debuted to a box office weekend total of $33 million and $60 million worldwide. Just a really bad total for that movie against a $180 million budget that obviously is just not going to get it done. And Tron has never really proved to be a huge box office, franchise for Disney. It's had more of a cult following through the years, even given the original film in 1982. And you had Tron Legacy, which at the time people thought didn't really do great. It did okay to where it's like maybe we'll do a sequel. But all these years later after Tron Legacy to come out with this third film, $33 million in the US on opening weekend, just horrific. I'm not saying there was a ton of hype for this movie, but I think if people were being optimistic and pessimistic at the same time, I think Disney would have hoped for it in between like 50 and 60, anything in between that, and I think they could have saved face. But $33 million ain't gonna do it with a budget of $180 million. That meant in total the movie would have had to have done at least like $400 million worldwide to even think about breaking even theatrically. So it just kind of begs the question, like, what the hell happened? Well, I think it's a two-part issue. For one, as I mentioned, Tron has never been that kind of box office juggernaut franchise, which is why bringing it back when they brought it back with Tron Ares with this new movie, it was kind of a surprise when they announced it, just because Tron has never proven to be that big of a financial success for Disney, more of a cult thing than anything. But when they brought it back, it was like, okay, this will be strike three for Tron if they don't get it right with this installment in terms of the critical reception and the box office. And I think it just goes to show with Tron, it's just really tough for them to crack that all-around digital formula. The thing that didn't help in this case is that even though Tron Legacy has had a pretty nice cult following, Tron Ares is not obviously a direct sequel to Tron Legacy. There's really bare minimum references to that film, and none of the characters from that film return except for Jeff Bridges as Flynn, but just for a small segment, nowhere near as big a role as he had in Tron Legacy. Had they done a more direct sequel to Tron Legacy, I think that would have piqued a lot more interest, seeing the further adventures, what happens really to Sam and Cora, because that's not at all what happens in Tron Ares here, just fleeting mention of any of the characters or fallout from Legacy. Instead, they chose to focus on a new character in Ares. And that's another big part of the problem, is Ares played by Jared Leto. After this movie, I think you got to give Jared Leto the label of being, box office poison when it comes to him being the main star of your film. He's got an Oscar, so he's proven he can give good performances. But after the reception of his Joker in Suicide Squad, which obviously was not a very good reception he got from that one, and obviously Morbius in 2022, just that movie is just infamous for just continuously getting made fun of, the memes, Morbin time, just everything about it, even if I personally don't think it's like the worst thing ever, but it's definitely not a good movie. And just a lot of things about Jared Leto in the news that I won't get into, but reported stories about him. A lot of people have their reasons for feeling a certain way about him in terms of not wanting to see him. I was talking to friends at work saying, hey, excited about Tron Ares? They said, it looks cool, but I don't really want to go out there and see Jared Leto. And that was an awakening moment for me over the past week, just realizing that, wow, a lot of people just don't want to see anything with Jared Leto, even if he's in a movie like Tron Ares, which, by the trailers and the music, everything about it looked kind of cool, but just a lot of people feel a certain way about him. So having him in the movie for Tron Ares, even though he was instrumental to bring the movie onto the screen, just because his contract with Disney helped them get the movie made. But I just think that him as the star, that was another big reason why that, people just didn't want to go out there and see the movie, giving the movie the label of a flop with $33 million. So kind of the fallout from that over the past few days, there's been reported stories that Disney had just said that the future of Tron on the big screen, well, there ain't no future. We're done with this which financially you can completely understand why. Again, Tron, not a huge franchise when it comes to actually making money. And this one, Tron Legacy, was just, kind of a mild disappointment at the box office, but, passable results. This one so far, unmitigated failure in terms of that opening weekend box office. So as much as a cult following as, Tron may have, the problem is people online say, oh yeah, we love Tron, but you don't go out there and see the movies. So Disney ain't going to keep on shoveling money into something that ain't making money. Even if, and no spoilers, the ending of Tron Ares did tease some stuff that I think would be kind of cool to see. It was kind of an ending that kind of set up a scenario where you could have the whole Tron universe come together with the characters from the original Tron 1982, Tron Legacy, seeing those characters, and, just a continuation of some stuff from Tron Ares, what the ending tease in the mid-credits, which I thought was kind of cool. But that ain't really going to happen if the movies aren't making money. Do I really think it's the end of Tron on the big screen? Most likely. I'm not going to say 100% though, because I think Tron is just something where every decade or so, I could see them trying again. The problem is that Jeff Bridges is going to be way too old to be coming back as Flynn at that point. At least I think he will. And at that point, is it worth it to bring back, characters from Tron Legacy and all that? I don't know about that. Something that would be kind of cool. I think this would actually get people in the seats. If you've ever seen Tron Legacy, if you remember, Cillian Murphy, aka Oppenheimer, he had a small role in that film, and it kind of teased an appearance that he could make later in terms of a big starring role. And it especially makes sense when you see characters that appear in Tron Ares. Problem is, Cillian Murphy's gotten a lot more expensive after Oppenheimer, but if they were to put him as the headliner for a Tron Ares sequel or follow-up, whatever you want to have, that could get people in the seats. But that's just me spitballing stuff here. Tron most likely is done on the big screen for now, but do I think there's a chance it could come back? I think Tron is just always going to be like a name or something of interest for Disney, to where, like I said, every decade and a half or so they could say, all right, let's give it a shot. Because there's clearly potential there. That's why they keep going back to it, even if the results financially aren't really there. Just the look, the music, everything about it, the aesthetic, everything about it is kind of interesting in terms of fully realizing it on the big screen. And they built the Tron rides at the theme parks at Disneyland over at Shanghai first, and they brought it to Magic Kingdom. That's really cool. So there's just something about the aesthetic of that world that I think that it's always going to be a flicker of hope that they can get it right. You saw my review for Tron Ares, you saw that. I thought the movie visually looks unbelievable. Visuals were unbelievable. Thought the music was really cool. Unfortunately, when it came to some, story developments and especially the characters, overall it made it a fairly mediocre movie. Even if I didn't hate it, I thought it had some fun to it. The reviews kind of back that up, where you look at the Rotten Tomatoes score, I think at this point it's at like the 52% Rotten Tomatoes. Decent audience scores though. So that's not like the worst thing ever. But this is a movie that I think because of, Tron, how it's been financially, it needed to get great reviews all around for people to really have that enthusiasm and go out to see it. Especially with, that baggage of Jared Leto as the star. Even though, again, he was instrumental in getting the movie made from Disney because of his contract, but him as the star, I think that didn't help out. So for Jared Leto, I think his days of being a leading man are over. I don't think any studio would ever risk him putting him as the headliner for any project, which is bad news for that Masters of the Universe movie that's coming out, He-Man, where he's playing Skeletor. That movie is apparently being made by Amazon MGM Studios. They got to be like, for any marketing, don't mention Jared Leto at all. Focus on everything but him. So we'll see what kind of marketing they do for that film. But for Tron Ares, something else it really brought up for me for Disney is what kind of year they've had financially, where, in 2023, Disney had a really bad year when it came to the kind of flops they had with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And I'm talking box office flops. Dial of Destiny, Wish, The Marvels, just a lot of movies that year that were just huge, like $200 million flops right there. Just a bunch of those. Where 2024 was a nice rebound for them, where, all their big movies that came out were real hits, where you had Deadpool and Wolverine, big hit. Inside Out 2 was just an unexpected mega hit. Moana 2, $1 billion, and even something like Mufasa, which, not like $1 billion hit, but I think it made over $600 million, which given how that movie started, was pretty good. But here in 2025, this year for Disney, overall, besides Lilo and Stitch, not really a good year at all for them. Lilo and Stitch was a big hit with $1 billion on a $100 million budget. That movie performed great for them, but everything else, just off the top of my head, Snow White, huge flop. Elio, huge flop. That and Snow White, over like probably 200 or even like $300 million lost on those ones. Even the Marvel movies, that shows what a different kind of era it is for Marvel. They really need Zootopia and Avatar, Fire and Ash to be big hits. Zootopia 2, that one's got to make $1 billion, just like how the first one did. And Avatar, Fire and Ash, that needs to be a big hit like the first two Avatars did. If those movies can be big hits, then I don't think they have anything to worry about in terms of replicating the overall damage 2023 did. There's a lot of people that, they love those headlines of Disney flopping and all that. I personally don't. Disney's given me a lot of entertainment joy in my life and still has a lot of franchises and things I love to see or visit at the theme parks. But this year, it's been a tough year for Disney in more ways than one. And talking about Disney, that brings me to the next story that kind of caught my eye this week, which is Disney reviving the live-action Tangled remake, or reimagining they like to call it, but focusing on Scarlett Johansson as being the lead, not as Rapunzel, but as Mother Gothel, that film's antagonist. It was earlier this year after Snow White flopped like crazy. Man, that lost a lot of money. They announced that, they were putting on hold the Tangled live action reimagining they were naturally gonna do. It's been a decent bit since that movie came out. It came out in 2010, like Tron Legacy, so 15 years ago. That's a decent amount of time right there. So a live action remake, especially given the climate these days, it's not the worst time to do it. But after Snow White flopped, they put it on hold just because they had to reassess things after Snow White naturally, just because of how bad that movie did, and see, okay, what kind of direction are we doing with these live action reimaginings? But I think naturally after Lilo and Stitch came out a few months later, and that was a live action reimagining that got, pretty good reception and was a big hit at the box office, I think it's natural that Disney was like, all right, back on track with these live action reimaginings, especially with something that I think would be box office viable like Tangled. Tangled's got a ton of merchandise. If you ever visit the Disneyland parks, obviously it's a beloved princess movie, the first in the kind of revival era for princess movies. Well, if you don't count Princess and the Frog, first of the 3D animated princess movies, with Rapunzel just being beloved. So a live action remake, given in how it came out, the first movie came out in 2010, and they're remaking Moana, which came out less than a decade ago now. Yeah, Tangled is naturally going to happen. Scarlett Johansson as Mother Gothel is a very interesting choice. That's one where I think just based on the casting, you're really going for more of a name than someone that naturally kind of fits that role. I know when they were talking about doing a Tangled live action remake, the best choice and obvious choice that everyone looked at was someone that's actually in the Disney family right now, which is Kathryn Hahn, known for playing Agatha in WandaVision and Agatha All Along. The way that she portrayed Agatha Harkness in those series, those Marvel series, man, that personality, that was just straight up Mother Gothel right there. Just even, kind of her look, it was just kind of perfect for playing Mother Gothel, which both of those characters, you compare them, their looks and personality, it was like, that's perfect casting right there. Going with the choice of Scarlett Johansson, which, that this is not like a definitive thing. This is just being reported. They're circling her for the role. That seems more of a thing of getting like, the biggest actress that you can in terms of name recognition, star power. For as good as Kathryn Hahn is as Agatha, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of Agatha All Along, she's really good in that role in WandaVision and Agatha All Along. But for as good as she is, she's not still like, a name, not an A-lister by any means, even though, a lot of people would recognize her. You put Scarlett Johansson front and center in a live-action remake for Tangled, I think naturally gets a bit more recognition. But then again, the more I think about it, it's all like, well, Gal Gadot's kind of a name also, but you put her in Snow White, and that actually hurt that movie. I don't think Scarlett Johansson's going to hurt a Tangled movie financially like Gal Gadot and a lot of other factors affected Snow White. But is it the best casting in terms of being creative or, just kind of casting how it should? Definitely not. But who knows? Maybe Scarlett Johansson's a good performer. Maybe she can bring out that personality. If this comes true, her being at Mother Gothel, maybe she could really bring it to life. But the Tangled live action remake, I think it's got potential to be something good. But I think Disney, after Snow White and The Little Mermaid to a certain degree, just cast the movie how it should. That's the biggest thing with these live action remakes, man. People love these stories. They just want to see the characters represented how they look in the original source of material. You don't have to be different just for different sakes. Just cast it how it should, give it that same energy as the first film did, and you can have something that can be a hit. Just because based on how people feel about Tangled, it should be a hit if you do it right. But Disney has shown that they're not always up to it in terms of making things look and feel how they should when it comes to their live action reimaginings. The last thing I wanted to bring up was K-pop Demon Hunters is returning again to the big screen. It was like a month and a half ago, after the film's big success on Netflix, they put out a sing-along version on the big screen for a very limited engagement for one weekend. Now, that was back when, this was like in August or something. I didn't really have much of I had heard of K-pop Demon Hunters, but wasn't something I was going out of my way to see. I hadn't watched it on Netflix. The weekend they were actually doing that limited engagement was the week they released the Chinese film Neza 2 on the big screen and in an English dub. And I was interested in watching that just because Neza 2 is got a huge box office overseas in China. So I went to see that just to see what the whole phenom of it was, because it was allegedly a $2 billion movie. I'm starting to have my doubts about that, if that was legit. But whatever, I saw Neza 2 that weekend, and there was basically no one in that auditorium. But when I checked the box office that weekend, I saw that K-pop Demon Hunters had $18 million in a limited engagement in the theaters that had no showings at AMC's. It was just Regal, Cinemark, and I believe that's it. With no AMC theaters on that list, you're cutting out a lot of money. But for a limited engagement like that to be number one at the box office with 18 million, kind of showed me that, holy crap, this is a pretty big phenom. Watched the movie afterwards, the day afterwards on Netflix, which it was there, and I was like, wow, that was a great movie, actually. I think the success and phenom of that movie is just a lot of it based on, the stories, great animation, action, performances, vocally are great. But the music, that movie's music is just some of the best music I've ever heard in terms of an original soundtrack. There's a reason that song Golden has been like number one for weeks since that movie came out. So it says by popular demand, they're bringing it back, the sing-along version on the big screen for the weekend of Halloween. So that's October 31st, which Halloween's on a Friday this year, November 1st and November 2nd. I want to go to it because I want to see what the in-theater experience is like in terms of this phenom and being there with everyone singing along, and that's a big fan, because seeing movies on the big screen is definitely hits different. That experience, just how massive movies feel, and the experience of watching it with others, it should be a fun time. So I'm hoping I can check that one out and see how big a deal or how much fun it is to see on the big screen with others, because I've only been able to watch it at home, the regular version. I haven't seen the sing-along version yet, so that'll be fun to check out. The real interesting question for that one is that will they eventually do a K-pop Demon Hunter sequel? And they will, just based on the phenomenal success, the phenom success that this one has had. So I can't imagine it just going straight to Netflix. I just think there's a lot of money to be lost if you do that. Sony Animation, I guess I have read some story that there just wasn't a lot of faith in the movies, so it got put on Netflix. And who knows, maybe the movie wouldn't have reached that phenom status had it not been easily available to watch on Netflix and people had to go and pay to go see it. But whatever the route, I think if they do a sequel, you put it at the box office or you put it in the theaters, oh, that's going to be something in terms of that spectacle. As long as it's not a huge piece of but even with that, it's still going to be something that's going to pique a lot of interest just based on and I don't use the word phenoms used almost too much, but K-pop Demon Hunters is a real phenom in terms of its success. I think, though, the problem they're going to have with the sequel is just watching that movie. I'm like, okay, I think it would almost be impossible to top, the quality of that first film. That first film is just special when it comes to those characters, that story, the revelations, and the music. Sort of stuff like Frozen 2 shows. It's really tough to capture that success of a movie that reaches phenom status. But for now, definitely excited to potentially, hopefully, check out the film on the big screen for the first time. So that'll do it for this first ever segment of news that I care about. Hopefully it's news y'all cared about too. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching.